and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am really excited about our special guest host this episode. One of my favorite people on planet Earth is here with me today, Paul Turner. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here, and I think you rock as well.
Thank you. And Paul is the owner, operator, and mastermind behind the Darkside Cinema, one of my favorite indie art house theaters in Corvallis, Oregon. And Paul is also a good friend, and we've actually been to a film festival together, the Ashland Film Festival. So back in the days when we used to do things in person instead of over computers. So look forward to that time again, hopefully someday in the future. But Paul has nicely agreed to co-host this episode with me. So we're going to be talking about some art house movies to go with the theme of because he is an owner of an art house theater. But first, I wanted to just give everyone an idea. It's been a few years since Paul's been on the show, so I thought it'd be fun, Paul, to talk about some of your favorite movies. I know when we were talking over email, you said you're not really a film snob, so I'm curious for you to elaborate that on that more.
I'll watch pretty much anything. As long I have the advantage of having a theater that was closed during COVID, and so almost nightly I would grab my dinner, set up one of the auditoriums, and watch a movie. So I burned through the whole Marvel catalog and enjoyed it, and have taken some crap for that from the purists, which I don't care. Um, so no, I don't. As much as I appreciate movie like Incendies, or the correct pronunciation also D, is an amazing film. It hits all the high spots for art house foreign film. Love the film, but I had a heck of a lot of fun with Captain America. So film is film, man. I mean,
Yeah.
this is what it is. There are people who it's such a wide variety. It's like religion, you can find one that fits eventually. And this is the thing about film, is that there's something for everyone. You just
Yeah, it's true.
you just got to commit to figuring it out.
Well, one things I've always found interesting is that you program, things at the dark side, I think, that are a little more off the beaten path, of course, but it's also sometimes I feel like also joins with your personal taste. You get movies that not all the art house movie theaters get, and then you get ones that I think are very specific to your local area in Corvallis. I know that you and I have talked about, for instance, that like environmental documentaries tend to do really well at the dark side, which they don't always do as well at our art house theater here in Salem. So we've talked about some of the movies that tend to do really well at the dark side. And I think that I imagine I would just be curious your perspective on programming for an art house theater. What are some of the challenges with that?
Well, I'm a co-owner of the Dark Side. My partner is Lainey Turner, former wife, and so imagine, if you will, Sunday night, which will be tonight, I think. Um, I will send out an email and say ideas, and then this flood of email. The response comes from Lainey, from Joey, from Caitlin. They all come in, and my job is to distill, and the distillation process of, I think, will do well what I think he wants or slash can stand, and the deal I can make with the studios. So the distillation process is, I'm the final cooking here, to
Yeah.
go Breaking Bad on that. But so this is what I do. So I get a lot of emails from studios. I interact with other art house cinemas and first run cinemas and try to go from there. This is art, it's show business, not show art, which means that we have to look really, really seriously at what's doing what, where. The
Yeah.
advantage we have is that we have 4 small screens. So that means we can go wild. Everyone's, almost every week it's like, okay, let's freak people out and play this movie, that both people who come to see it will absolutely adore it. And then, we can make money in the other 3 auditoriums. We're
Right.
just reopening after COVID, so we don't have the latitude we used to have. And we have to be a little more surgical in our financial choices.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know COVID has just taken a huge toll on movie theaters across the country, especially independent theaters. So I can only imagine what you've gone through. And I still appreciate though that you'll show something like right now you're showing Dune, which is obviously not an art house movie. It's a huge,
It is
huge
now.
a huge big budget movie, but I think probably goes over really well with the Corvallis crowd. And then you'll show something really esoteric, like some of the ones we're about to review. So I love that about your theater. Just for those who don't know, check out Darkside Cinema. I love that Lainey as well as Joey and Caitlin, who I think are employees, that you guys all, talk together about what you want to show. So I think that's great that it's a communal effort. And your motto, we suck less every day. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, it's just the best. So we'll move on, and we'll go on to a movie that you showed that I didn't get to see in the theater, but that you showed at the Dark Side, and I think it showed there several weeks. So I'm pretty excited to review this one. This is the movie Pig from 2021, starring Nicolas Cage as a truffle hunter who lives alone in the forest and goes into the city to search for his kidnapped pig. Sounds like a bizarre plot. Going in, I actually thought, based on some of the early reviews I'd seen, that this was going to be sort of like a John Wick, but with a pig. I thought it was going to be Nicolas Cage going full like action movie, revenge type of thing. And it actually is not that kind of movie at all. It's actually very contemplative character study with Nicolas Cage as this loner who has this backstory that we only very eventually, over the course of the movie, unfolds why he ended up where he is living alone in the woods with a pig. He's had some trauma and grief in his life, and we kind of slowly discover this. This movie was filmed on location in Oregon, and so that was actually pretty cool to see as well. And it actually brings in a lot of the fine dining scene from the Portland area into the plot, which I thought was really, really specific and interesting. This movie, I don't think did very well in Salem, but you actually showed it for several weeks at the Dark Side. Is that
Well,
correct?
only 12.
Okay. So only 12 weeks, is that what you said?
Only 12 weeks. Yeah, it was.
Wow. So did it
We,
do pretty well for you then?
it did. We opened with it. And
Wow.
so when we opened July 16th, after being closed for 15 months, we opened with that movie. And people were so deprived of cinema. We could have been showing someone reading the phone book and they would have shown up for that. But I took a chance on it because it is, you just described it. It's completely bizarre. And Nicolas Cage, seriously, what can you do? But the main thing about it is it was shot in Portland, which is a huge draw for us. So it's a local film. Um, the the underlying tones of food and what food means is a big deal in Corvallis. So what we did is we looked at that theme and booked the movie based on a few other things as well. But also the studio is someone we've done a lot of work with over the years, and they're really good folks. And we're all trying to get back together in this. So that was what made us choose it. But the thing that a lot of films like this that have multiple layers, it takes a while to get started.
Yeah.
So we brought it in, dropped off, and I'm like, yeah, hold on, let's give this a little while longer. Then it would go up again, and then it would drop, and we go, we don't have anything better to bring in, and then up it goes again. So yeah, it was a weird run, but we're grateful for it.
I think it's one of those ones that's kind of word of mouth, because I don't know if I would have been interested in it, of course, based just on the name. And Nicolas Cage in recent years, he's done some really, I mean, he's definitely doing interesting work. I'll give him that. But he's, kind of 50-50 for me. But he's actually fantastic in this movie. I think it's one of his best performances in recent years. Very subtle performance, but you just feel the weight of whatever this guy has gone through. And I loved the aspect of, like you mentioned, the connection to food and the connection to people's souls and really their humanity, I think is a very prominent theme in the movie. So I just absolutely loved that. And of course, the photography is great. The pig, who I learned online was not a very trained pig and actually bit Nicolas Cage quite a few times. Seems like a trained pig. I mean, he comes when he calls him, and has a great personality. So
Yeah,
And there's some great support for a really low budget movie. You have Adam Arkin comes in a small role. You have some other, great character actors that come in small roles. So not a lot of people in the movie. I think they shot it on a shoestring budget. You mentioned the distributor Neon, which is a great independent film company. So just a lot of things to love here. Actually, I think this definitely is a 4-star film for me. It's one of my favorites that I've seen this year.
I would agree. Neon released Parasite before the world collapsed, and we played that forever, and they were extremely fair about the terms, especially after the world collapsed, and we were all struggling. So when their movie came up, we decided that that was going to be one of the first ones we would play. That's kind of the business end of it. The more artistic end of it is that for me, it was just a movie about processing loss. And throughout the movie, there are various themes of all of these characters have experienced loss in some way
Hmm.
and different ways of dealing with it. It makes a lot of fun of the pretension of some of the foodie scene.
Yeah.
There is a scene where he disassembles a chef in his restaurant that was typical Nicolas Cage, and I enjoyed that probably more than I should. And when I wrote a review of the movie, that was snipped before we sent it out to the world because my partner felt that it was a little too negative because a lot of those people take umbrage when you make fun of them.
Oh, can
Um,
I see the snipped part that you wrote? I want to read that because I loved that scene. I thought it was completely right about how the high-end food scene can get so ridiculous. And at one point he says, do you even enjoy what you're cooking? Like, do you even want to eat this? I thought that was great.
yeah, yeah,
It gets back to that connection to the soul again.
and connection to what what the chef's dream really was, as opposed to what he was doing.
Right. Yeah.
Again, we're back to loss. So did this chef lose his way, and was that loss represented in that he was cooking food that didn't really um, speak to him? And so Nicolas Cage sits in his restaurant and tells him, this is what I think. You used to work for me. I know
Hmm.
who you are. I know what your dream was. What the hell are you doing? So
Right.
this was, to me, it was a really good scene and impeccably acted by all three people at the table.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It was a great scene, and I think it's the perfect COVID film in a way. It was a perfect film to open with because we're all collectively going through our own loss, whether it was a loss of someone we loved due to COVID, or the loss of our way of life, or the loss of our business, or whatever the person. We've all had loss during this
Yeah.
time, and so a film about that I think was perfect. So yeah, I'm so glad you're showing movies like this. So I think we should move on to our next movie, which I think is one of your favorites. So I'm excited to review this one. So go ahead.
So 2010, our friend Denis Villeneuve, who made a small movie that's popular now called Dune, he did a movie called Incendies, or also D, depending on how French you want to be. Um, Set in the Middle East, it's the story of twins who travel and with their family. The thing about the film is that it is extremely difficult. This is a film that is going to upset people, and it did. We played it, and we had a lot of pissed off people in the lobby afterwards, which
Oh,
frankly
really?
makes my day. But and they keep coming back. So there are a lot of issues in this film that make people extremely uncomfortable. But the thing about it is the story was beautifully plotted and absolutely believable in the way it transpired. It also gives a more, I don't want to say, let's just say the American continent view into what's happening in the Middle East. And we get to see it much more personally than we would in various cleaned up, sanitized versions. And it's a journey. It is an epic journey to an end that many people found uncomfortable, and this doesn't happen often. It actually surprised me how it ended and how well it ended. I did not expect that. So um, we're playing another movie now called Lamb, which would have gone well with Pig. And it has the same thing where the ending actually surprised me, which I did not
Hmm.
expect. And that's so watching Lamb, it it brought me back to Incendies because it again it was that moment, kind of like in literally a millisecond, suddenly the whole film snaps into focus, and for me that's what Incendies did.
Yeah, this movie, it's interesting. And I'd imagine this is probably one of the reasons that you're drawn to a movie like this. When you see so many movies, it's hard to surprise you after a while. And so I think this movie definitely has that element. My regular co-host on the show, Brian Michael, this was one of his favorite films of that year when it came out, and I liked it less than him. But it's been literally since it came out that I have seen it, so I rewatched it recently, and I actually appreciated it more. And what the director, this is before he started to do big spectacle movies like Blade Runner and Arrival and Dune, when he was making more human scale movies. And these twins, the brother and sister in the film, are kind of opposite personalities. She really wants to dig into their past, and the brother is just like, leave it alone. And it kind of switches between their perspectives throughout the film. And then as they uncover the layers, you just start to think more and more. It's a little bit like a thriller, but drawn out over an epic scale. And so because there's elements of a thriller in that, you never know exactly what they're going to find next about their past and how much is going on there. It's set in kind of this, I'd almost say generic. I don't think they actually ever identify the country exactly where it's set. It's sort of a generic Middle Eastern country that's been war torn, between Christians and Muslims, I believe. And so and their mother was a Christian who I think fell in love with a Muslim, and so there was this kind of backstory of that relationship. So there's a lot of twists and turns in this film, which I appreciated a lot more the second time viewing it. I think because um, I wasn't just taken aback by the big surprise ending, so I was able to absorb more the various aspects of the story.
Yeah, I had to watch it. I watched it several times, and recently I rewatched it with someone who had never seen it before. And he plays it safe as far as what country all of this is happening in, and in which everything's happening. Um, and that's okay because it's very plot and character driven. This is not a documentary, so
Yeah.
for me that worked really well. I did, as you said, the brother and sister, they begin to switch roles, and um, the the brother actually, you know, stepping up towards the end was something that I really appreciated. And it's a film that makes you work a bit to get through it, and to me that's important. Otherwise I wouldn't do what I do. As much as I
Hmm.
like watching, a lot of silly movies, this is the kind of movie that when it's over it's like, I remember, this is why I do this. So
Yeah. Yeah. And interesting that he went from making this kind of movie, the director Villeneuve, to doing these big spectacle type movies, because it obviously shows he has an interest in character development. But not that Arrival or Blade Runner 2049, I think that's what it's called, don't have some character development, but those are obviously much bigger. But you could see that he wanted to work on the big scale, because in a way this movie has, you have cross time happening. There's a lot of flashbacks to what really happened when the mother was younger. And I found that part of it really interesting, the way he edited that in, because the siblings, as they're uncovering things, don't know this has happened yet, so we're actually a little bit one step ahead of what they're discovering about their past. So I really appreciated that aspect of it as well. So I think it's just really interesting. It's just a great thriller, and it's definitely, if you're a fan of his newer movies, it is, I think, worth checking out some of these earlier films that Villeneuve did, just to see where his background is, what his interests are.
yeah, you might want to not watch this one with the kids.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you go back to one of his the film earlier films that he did after Incendies. Sicario
yeah. Sicario, great one.
was a film that, for me, kind of brought the intensity of Incendies back. Sicario was very action, bang bang, stuff blows up. Um, and a great movie. But it was, even with all of that, it felt like the undertones of Sicario reflected what he was doing in Incendies, and
Yeah.
so that was a connection that I enjoyed making. And I didn't do it before this episode that we're taping, but I would love to. I am going to watch Sicario again. So it's just an amazing film.
I love Sicario. I thought it was really underrated. Well, obviously it wasn't. They made a sequel, but I don't remember if it was a huge hit or not. But I remember being surprised by it when I saw it, and how great it was. And it has the political aspect that this film has as well, which I really really loved. And of course Benicio del Toro, who I can kind of watch in anything. So,
And strong female characters, which was
hmm
good, as he did in Incendies, where there was the main character was a very um, in a not a typical role that we would
hmm
expect this. So I think that there was a, I felt really, I felt that he did a very good job of including women in non-traditional roles without it looking like he was shoehorning them in order to make
right.
a statement.
Yeah, and that's a good point. In almost all of his films, I think with maybe the exception of Blade Runner, he's had really great, strong female characters. Arrival, of course, Amy Adams' character is a really interesting, complex character as well. So that's definitely a through line in a lot of his films. And um, Brad Wortman and I in the previous episode reviewed Dune, and I mentioned that I thought Rebecca Ferguson's character of Lady Jessica was one of the most interesting characters in the movie. So yeah, another good point. So we'll move on to our next movie, which is one that also showed at your theater, and I was super excited to see it. And it is Titane. So I looked up the pronunciation. A French film, won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, which is their top prize. Caught everyone a little bit by surprise because it's kind of a horror film. And it is about a boy, I had a hard time with the description on this one. It is about a woman with an obsession with cars who becomes a serial killer and then is taken in eventually by a fire captain who believes that she is his son. And that's just only part of the plot, actually. So this is a really, really weird, really complex movie that I loved, loved, loved. And this is definitely one I could imagine a lot of people walking into the theater and then walking out going, "What the heck did I just watch?"
Yep.
And when I walked out and saw it, I said, "This is amazing." I saw it at the local art house theater here in Salem, Salem Cinema, but I know you showed it also at the Darkside, and I just can imagine how people reacted to this one. I loved it. The director, Julia Ducournau, previously directed Raw in 2016, another very bizarre movie that I also loved, although not as much as this one. So I'm curious, Paul, what you thought of this one.
What was interesting is how many people walked out of this movie.
Oh, I imagine.
Yeah, and they looked at me like, I just kicked a nun or something as they're going out the door. It's like, what the hell were you thinking? Um, yes, I'm a car guy. So I was like, okay, at least it was a Cadillac, which is horrible. It's like the beginning of the Green Book. It states, 1962 New York, and then a 64 Impala goes driving by, and it's like, ah. So anyway, car to me. That was interesting to me. The movie had the same vibe as Bessemois, which was a serial killer film. Two women go nuts and slaughter a bunch of folks. Um, and so again, a French film. The thing about I'm not going to pronounce it because you looked it up. I just kept saying Titane because I'm doing the phonetic English. Um, I liked it. It was, again, it's a movie that pushes the edges. It pissed a lot of people off, which actually is kind of cool. But I found that it was difficult to watch a lot of the time, and especially as he is um, as she is pretending to be a he in order to garner favor and protection from the fire captain. Um, that became, it was very tense because you knew it was just a matter of time until there was a discovery, and then the twist during the discovery was absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, great twist. And I have to say, the first 20 minutes or so, I thought, am I going to enjoy this movie? Because it starts her character's working at these like car shows where they have sexy women draped over the cars, gyrating on top of them. And I thought, and it almost was very male gaze oriented at the beginning. And I thought, this is weird. But then I remembered, okay, as a female filmmaker, I've seen her previous. I have a feeling she's going to go somewhere with this, and boy, does she. So you have this kind of body horror aspect that reminded me of Cronenberg, but it's so much deeper than that. She goes into all sorts of places with, as you mentioned, this trying to take on this role to become this boy to because this fire captain who's this ultra masculine guy who leads this group of like very masculine firefighters. They're all at the firehouse together doing macho things together. He really wants his son back, and so she's trying to conform to become this son. But they have this very odd kind of dynamic between them. He's an odd character. He's injecting himself with steroids. So there's so many layers there, just with the idea of the masculinity and what the expectations of society. But then on top of that, she's got this kind of her own fetish with things that are not human that comes from her childhood. And there are kind of hints that there was maybe problems with her father. So there's a lot going on. I could definitely, it's not your typical horror movie in that way. It is extremely graphic. So I will put that out there. Another one not for the kiddos. But I had no idea where it was going to go. I mean, from minute to minute, I thought I just have no clue what's going to happen next in this movie. And to me, that was thrilling.
Yeah, I agree. It's as you said, it's a very percussive movie, and a lot of folks do not tolerate that well. You know, if you're expecting Merchant Ivory, you're going to be very disappointed and probably traumatized. But the whole vibe of it, it started off for me like watching a music video. It was fast, it was glossy, you had attractive women being provocative. And when it started, it's like, oh God, what have I done? And then as the story developed, you realize that this percussive, flashy set was actually one of the characters that actually
Hmm.
played very well into the rest of the film.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And it
I
didn't stay with that vibe, which yeah, I was worried too at the beginning. I thought this is like an 80s music video with the hot girl on top of the car or whatever. And
yeah,
then but it doesn't stay there. So you have to have patience with it. But it's not for everyone. But this is a movie. I love art house theaters like yours because this is the place where we can see these types of movies. And for those of us who like weird things and things that are unexpected, we have a place to see those. So
yeah.
and Brad is giving me the wrap up sign. So I have to, we're out of time, but I really enjoyed having you, Paul. I hope you are willing to do it again. I know it's not the same as being in the studio, but it had a great time having you on the show.
Thank you so much. And yeah, the sooner we can get back in the studio, the happier we'll all be.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you. And as always, Real Film Snobs, we're on the web, we're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I'd like to thank our fantastic crew, our amazing sponsors, including Darkside Cinema and CC Media. You can watch us there, Scan TV in Silverton, Corvallis Access Media, KMUZ Radio, KMWV Radio. Have a great day and great movies. Thank you.
Thank you.